Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign overview guide for Wurrzag, the great green prophet of the Greenskins. He's basically Greenskin Jesus, at least for the savage orcs that he is leading. When it comes to the Greenskins, they are one of the most powerful races in the game. Why is that though, you might ask? Well, they have a good economy, baseline economy. They can get increased income from sacking settlements, which you want to do a lot if you are going to be playing any of the Greenskins and Legendary Lord. They have amazing growth. Their level 1 growth structures, the idols, give them 20 growth. And this goes all the way to 40. They have a commandment that gives them growth, and then they have the WA meter, which gives them an additional 30 growth faction-wide. So it is a ridiculous amount of growth. They earn a ridiculous amount of money from sacking settlements, and they can then easily rebuild those settlements. Also helps that quite a lot of their structures are pretty damn cheap. Like tier 1 structures are very cheap, and while certainly higher level structures can be a bit expensive, getting to at least tier 3 is certainly cheap with the Greenskins. And besides, you'll be earning so much money that you could be running an economy at a significant deficit, and as long as you can sack a settlement, one turn, a major settlement, you'll make more than enough money to keep your campaign going. Now, what does Wurrzag get? He has a charge bonus faction-wide to savage orcs. You know, enemy hero action success chance minus 50%, that doesn't really matter. WA has a chance to contain savage orcs. Wurrzag himself is a powerful caster. He gets a minus 50% upkeep for savage orc units, recruitment cost, physical resistance, and he replaces WA with Wurzag's WA. He then gets significant benefits to savage orc units in his army. However, the problem for Wurrzag is that although he has significant army benefits, he doesn't have any really strong faction-wide benefits. Though he is a pretty powerful caster in his own right, and certainly more than capable of holding his own. Let's talk about positioning in his campaign. Like with Wurrzag, you don't want to recruit a bunch of savage orcs. For other armies, you might benefit from having a couple of savage orcs, but bear in mind that savage orcs do have some issues. They're since they have 0 armor, they're very vulnerable to a lot of attacks. They'll take a lot of damage. They do have pretty good leadership and other decent stats, but they're not necessarily the best units you can recruit. Though, thankfully, as Wurrzag, you do have the ability of getting the Idol of Gork for all of them, thus giving them a substantial amount of missile resistance, which is certainly something that they can struggle with. Alright, so with that in mind, what do you want to do with Wurrzag? Well, you actually want to just eliminate this minor Greenskin faction. So there's 2 armies, you're able to easily curb stomp them. You could confederate this faction once you've wiped them out, but it's probably in your best interest to actually just take these territories on your own, because that way you can sack them, you will get experience, all that, and then go for the tower over here, and then start working on the Blood River Valley, in particular wiping out Karagvar. You might want to make a deal with Scrag and actually help him out. You don't want to go west in this campaign, but the problem is you do have, between Sartosa, the Border Princes, and specifically Belagar, your western flank is always going to be under threat. So that's always something you're going to keep an eye on, though it's not necessarily something you want to devote significant resources to. To the east are the major issues. Queek, Scarbrand to the southeast, the Crooked Moon, Mutinous Gits, Clan Vermin, as well as to the north, Forgrim. What should you do in this particular campaign? Well, there are multiple choices. I would argue taking the entirety of the Blood River Valley by force, not for diplomacy, not for confederation, though if you could go over here, right, if you could show up at the Scambii and just smash the chieftain into the dirt, you could take over this entire territory without having to fight a bunch of battles. So it's like we're looking at here 3 regions that you could take, though you're probably going to encounter heavy resistance if you try and do that. It might be beneficial, actually, to confederate from this initial faction from a certain perspective, so you don't have to fight a bunch of battles. But similarly, like there's benefits to just having to fight them on your own. Then there's this minor ogre faction. You probably want to wipe them out. But yeah, and find the Scabby Eye leader, take him out, confederate them, take his territory, then go march on Barak Var. Take out Barak Var, and then the road to Karazakarak will be open to you. After you've secured Karazakarak, you should make some kind of deal with Skarsnik. You don't want to confederate Skarsnik right off the bat, though you could always do so if you want to. You could always take him out in a battle and force confederation on him. But you could also, you should try and take Death Pass. Now, Clan Vermin, which controls Death Pass, is always going to be under threat from Karak Azul. You don't want to interfere in this fight initially, and ideally you'd interfere when Black Crag is under siege by Karak Azul, take out Karak Dorn. Like, you want to take Karazakarak, you want to take the Silver Road, and then maybe interfere before Black Crag falls to Karak Azul. After that, you might want to take Karak 8 Peaks itself, Karak Azul, all these territories, and it's at that point you're likely going to encounter resistance from Skarsnik. But there's another issue as well, and that issue is Malagor. Malagor is generally a nuisance because what he does is he puts a Hearthstone over here in the Sunken Kermarch, and he then proceeds to do a lot of damage to the surrounding territory, making it so that when Skarbrand, who has a tendency of raising settlements to the ground, when he raises them, you can't take them back until you've dealt with the Hearthstone over here and taken out Malagor. But what should be your campaign plan? Well, you have a bunch of choices. Let's look at the situation. You've got the large number of terrain types, and this is actually a major advantage in your campaign, because you can take the jungle, the desert, the savanna, the mountain. What that means is really, from a practical term, is like, yeah, you could go play a campaign to the north in the Empire, if you so desire, or you could just support Scrag so that he can survive against the combination of Sartosa and Belagar, or Belagar and the Border Princess. You could do so. You could head north and fight in the Empire, or you could fight an entire campaign going into the south. Those are your choices. Or you could head east if you so decide. There might be some benefits in heading east. One of the major ones in heading east, of course, like you could confederate Skarsnik, you could then find Grimgor and knock him out. It would be a pretty brutal battle, but you could force confederation on him. And then head over here to get Azak. Like, you have 3 legendary lords of the Greenskins within striking distance that you could force confederation on them. And if you got Grimgor and Azak in your faction, Skarsnik to a lesser extent, though he's kind of useless actually as a legendary lord. But if you can get these 3, you're going to become a true powerhouse that's going to be very difficult to stop. What's difficult to do in a campaign is to get Grom the Punch, but to be honest, Grom is not really that great to get as a Confederation Legendary Lord. He's more important if you're playing him. Like, for Grom, it's not his Lord effects that make him great, it's the faction-wide effects if you're playing him, so it's not too important if you're losing out on that. Though you can always get the Defeat the Legendary Lords mod to be able to get Grom when he inevitably gets wiped out, because Grom does have a hard start position. Perfectly doable if you do decide to play him, given the power of the Greenskins and the power Grom has at his command, but when played by the eye, he does tend to struggle. By either way, get an entire army of Savage Orcs. Savage Orc Archers are pretty effective, so you should get the Savage Orc camp from the Gathering and start getting Savage Orc Archer boys, and then eventually get the Savage Orc host to get access to all of these great units, like the Orc Boar Big Guns, the Savage Orc Big Guns, like pretty powerful units in melee, though of course the lack of armor is going to hamper them. I would not necessarily get every army with Savage Orcs, like a couple of them can be great, especially their archers are pretty effective. They're effective in range, they're effective in melee even. They have pretty decent melee stats when you look at it, or at least melee attack stats, not necessarily melee defense. But Savage Orcs can be pretty vulnerable, so I would not necessarily bother too much with them. I think like what this faction really needs would be some benefits to Savage Orcs faction-wide. Wurrzag has them in his army, but I think if we could get some of these benefits, and this could apply to a lot of lords, like if we could get, like, say, half these benefits to all armies faction line, like 3% or 4%, or a couple of, some physical resistance to some physical resistance to units faction-wide, melee attack to Savage Orcs faction-wide. That would make this faction a lot more viable. As it currently stands, though, Wurrzag is probably the worst of the Greenskin Legendary Lords, though he is an absolute menace to deal with if you're playing as poor Forgrim Grudgebearer, but I'll get to him in a future video. Anyway, you do have, those are your choices in the campaign. So take this initial territory, then either take the Stone Mine Tower, or just make a beeline for Spite over here, knock him out in a battle, force Confederation on him, and then go for Barak Var. With Barak Var secured, take out Karazak, make some deal with Skarsnik, or take out Skarsnik, deal with Clan Vermin, Karakay Peaks, then Clan Moors. You should be able to throw in multiple stacks of troops to deal with Clan Moors. Hell, you might even be able to save poor Gorfang Rotgut if you're quick enough over here in the campaign. And then after that, you could go south, conquer the entirety of the Southlands, like all of it, under your direct control, because you can hold all of the territory there. Or you could head east into the Darklands, into the mountains and more, to get access to Grimgor and Azak in particular. Azak does tend to get wiped out in his campaign, so if you move quickly enough into the Darklands, you might be able to, well, knock him out before that happens and get him on your side. What's also interesting about Wurrzag's campaign, though, is like you can take the entirety of Lustria as well. That's like there's a lot of territory on the campaign map that you can take, which is pretty good from a campaign perspective. Like you do not want to be stopped just because you can't take over territory or the territory is unsuitable. Anyway, that's all for now. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and I'll see you boys and girls next time. We have Forgrim coming up.